Quick warning, this episode does cover some very disturbing and violent material, so viewer and listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to Wyrd Wessex. My name's Andy.
And my name is Craig.
And today we have something quite dark for you. It's something that's become a bit of an obsession for you, Craig, isn't it?
Uh, Maybe. So I originally wrote this and we were going to record it a couple of months back and based it on lots of stuff found online. But then my lovely wife, as we were about to record, went, "Wait, don't do it. I've bought you the book." So she's bought me a book called The Hinterkaifeck Murders by D.A. Chadwick. And so I basically took my original notes. I read the book and I've shoehorned extra details and stuff, and we've ended up hopefully with a more thorough version of events than what we would have had.
Because yes, this is the Hinterkaifeck murders, where I've I've heard so many versions of this, but they all tend to be the same, and it's all fairly sketchy on detail. But from what I've gathered from everything you've taken from this book, we got a little bit more in-depth understanding than we had before.
Yeah, the book is really good. It kind of tells an overview of the story, but then it goes into the police version of events. There are the interviews with certain people that happen with the police afterwards. Those are all written in there as well. So you can actually pick it up from multiple perspectives. So what I've done is taken all of that and compile it into one, hopefully coherent.
Can't even
What a
say
place
it.
to cock up that. Fucking hell. Coherent narrative.
Well done.
Yeah. So shall we get into it?
Let's get into it.
On the evening of the 31st of March, 1922, on a remote Bavarian homestead called Hinterkaifeck, which literally means behind Kaifeck, Kaifeck being a nearby town. The farm was built around 1863 and was surrounded on all sides by a woodland known as Hexenholes, or the Witch's Woods. On the farm lived a family of 5 and their 44-year-old maid, Maria Baumgartner. We should have checked the pronunciation of these names before we started.
Yeah, well, let's go for it.
Let's do a generic now. Apologies if we say the names wrong, because there's a few coming up.
Yeah.
So the family, including 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, not to be confused with the one from Die Hard.
That's Hans. That's his descendant, Hans. Trying to see where he got that from.
His 72-year-old wife, Kazelia, along with their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, and her children, another Kazelia, and Joseph. They were all murdered in what is considered one of the most gruesome and puzzling unsolved crimes in German history.
6 months prior to the attack, the family maid had actually quit. Her reason being that she believed the house to be haunted. After events, when she was speaking with the police, she said she kept hearing noises in the attic and had a constant feeling of being watched. A few odd things started to occur as well, such as Andreas finding a newspaper from Munich on the property that he hadn't actually bought, didn't know how he got there, and a house key going missing. He'd also reported to neighbours, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, that he had found fresh footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the house, but not going back again.
On the morning of the murders, Andreas and Victoria had headed to town, where Andreas, usually quite reserved, had mentioned to the store owner that he'd been hearing strange noises in the attic, which he'd gone to inspect with his shotgun only to find nothing but flattened hay, as if someone had recently lain there. On another occasion, his cows had been untied and were discovered roaming around the courtyard, and he also mentioned that he and his daughter had seen a man watching them from the woodland just a few days before.
Despite all these occurrences, he refused to report it to the police and said that he would deal with it by himself. Possibly not wanting to involve the police could be something to do with his previous involvement with the authorities, but we'll get to that a little bit later. On the evening of the 31st of March 1922, as a snowstorm pushed in, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived at around 5:30 to start working for the family, Her sister, Franziska, had escorted her to Hinterkaifeck and stayed for around about an hour before making her way back out through the forest. One thing that was noted at this point was that Victoria had bruises to her face and her arm. The day before, her daughter Kazilla had appeared tired at school when she was questioned by the teacher and said that her grandfather, Andreas, had hit her mother, and her mother had run screaming from the house, so it's unclear what this was about. Again, we'll come back to this abusive nature of their relationship. Yep. So while the family were known to keep to themselves, in the coming days, the people in the town started to speak to each other and ask questions, particularly when 7-year-old Kazilla Gabriel stopped turning up to school, and then the family failed sharp at church and failed to collect their mail.
A few people visited the farm in the days that passed, including a 22-year-old mechanic who had come to work on April 4th. He found the place eerily quiet, except for the incessant barking of the dog and the mooing of the cows. While working in the engine room for a few hours, he noted at one point when he dropped a nut that he thought he'd seen someone run past the shed, but when he came to investigate, he found nobody. He finished up his work and peered through the kitchen window to check for the Grubers, but as no one was around, he left a message to say he'd completed the work with 2 young women working in the garden of a neighbouring farm. These women were the daughters of local town leader Lawrence Schlittenbauer, which we mentioned earlier, actually, didn't we?
Yes.
Lawrence sent his 2 sons, 9 and 16-year-old, to Hinterkaifeck with the message, but they too found nobody there. And so that afternoon, Lawrence Schlittenbauer, a neighbor who had previously had a relationship with widower Victoria, headed to the farm with a couple of neighbors, Michael Poll and Jacob Sigel, I think that is.
Jacob, I don't know.
Jacob, maybe, along with the 2 sons.
Forcing their way into the barn, Lawrence stumbled over something before Poll shouted, "A foot!" It was Andreas Gruber. They went on to find 4 bodies with severe head injuries and blood-smeared faces, including Andrea, Kazilla, their daughter Victoria, and the 7-year-old Kazilla. While the sight made Michael Poll and Jakob Sigel dashed fresh air, Lawrence seemed undisturbed. Later autopsies revealed that 72-year-old Kazilla was found with 7 mortal blows to her head. Victoria had 9 star-shaped wounds to her head and strangulation marks on her neck. Her wounds were said to possibly be from a pickaxe, but they were puzzled by pencil-sized holes in her skull. Her face was also described by officers as smashed in.
The other autopsy reports are missing from the records, possibly destroyed in the bombing of World War II. However, detective reports say that Andreas Gruber's face was shredded with the right cheekbone exposed. Kazilla Gabriel's skull was smashed and she had a fatal gaping wound to her neck directly below her lower jaw. Oof. It's thought that she lived for 2 to 3 hours after the attack and was found clenching clumps of her own hair in her fists. It's thought that she did this as she slowly died in agony.
Concerned for the welfare of the 2-year-old Joseph, who was presumed to be starving at that point, Lorenz made his way through the barn, avoiding the loose cow by climbing into the feeding trough and then onto the living quarters, where he unlocked the door from inside for the other neighbours. Here they found 2-year-old Joseph, who had been sleeping in his stroller. On his head there were blows that had cracked his skull, thought to have been made in the middle of his face. The new maid, Maria, was found on the floor covered in a blanket. Her skull had multiple cross-stroke marks made with a blunt tool, and the back of her head had blood-filled 4-centimetre hole. At the time, the men did not know who she was, referring to her as the strange woman in police reports.
Yeah, because she'd literally turned up that night. This was her first night on the job, so nobody else but the family knew her at this point.
Yeah, this is where it gets almost a bit more disturbing, isn't it?
Don't know. I think we've done the most disturbing bit.
This is true, although there's something about this I find quite unsettling, this next bit, actually.
Whoever did the murders then continued to live at the property for some time, stacking 4 of the bodies in the barn. During this time, they seemingly lived a normal farm life. They baked bread. They changed the date on the calendar. They ate the meat that was in the smokehouse, and they did general farm maintenance jobs such as feeding the cattle and sweeping the barn. There was some evidence that the perpetrator might have tried to bury the bodies, but the ground was too hard because of how cold it was. It is often mentioned that they also looked after the family's dog Spitz. However, it was later reported by the chief judge that the dog had been wounded in its right eye, which was cloudy and swollen, and that Spitz, and I quote, shows great fear, curls up, and begins to tremble violently. He can't be touched.
On the night after the crime, a man passing by the farm noted smoke coming from the chimney, suggesting that the murderer had been living quite calmly at the farmstead. It was also noticed that the smoke from the fireplace had a revolting smell.
Yeah, what had he burned that night in the oven?
Yeah.
Some of the victims' clothing was suspiciously blood-free when the bodies were found.
Oh, okay.
So you got to wonder, had the murderer changed their clothes and burned the bloodstained ones?
I mean, yeah, potentially. If you've got a revolting smell, I guess clothes would do that.
But again, why? It's a really weird case.
It is. The whole surroundings of it are weird. Everything's weird and unsettling about it. So, Inspector George Reingruber and his department investigated the killings. Investigators initially believed the motive for the murders may have been a robbery gone awry, but there are a number of things that hampered the investigation from the onset. Firstly, several people tampered with the crime scene, moving bodies and even going as far as to cook in the home's kitchen. It is said that dozens of locals came to the crime scene along with at least 17 investigators. Exact numbers are vague as reports vary, and it was at least another day before the first investigations of the crime scene took place, in the dark, with nothing but kerosene lamps.
That detail just is bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need to find out who did this murder, so let's turn up and investigate in the dark. The fuck?
Yeah, is it just lazy, or is it like just sort of ineffective training, or, you know?
I don't know. It's bizarre.
Secondly, crime scene itself didn't offer any clues as to the true motive either. The robbery theory was thrown out when police discovered a decent amount of money at home still. Police at the time also failed to secure any fingerprints from the crime scene, despite fingerprint evidence being used in Germany since 1906. It took at least 4 days before the investigators secured any footprints, and by then these were a mix of crime scene and contamination from all the other people walking around the farmstead.
When detectives left the farmstead after 10 hours of investigating, they had even failed to examine the attic and the barn. At this point, it was theorized that there were 2 perpetrators who had somehow lured the members of the house to the barn, one at a time, and murdered them there. According to the police report, the reason for the footprints leading to the farm in the days before the murder but not leaving again is thought to be that the perpetrators were waiting for the snow to melt before they left. I guess so there was no trail out to the neighbour's house or something.
Well, that's it. Yeah, exactly.
We'll get to that. The day after the discovery of the bodies, court physician Johann Baptist Emüller performed autopsies in the barn. It was established that a mattock, a tool with a flat side and a pickaxe, was the most likely murder weapon, although the weapon itself was not found at the scene.
At a loss for leads, the desperate police even sent the craniums to Nuremberg, where they were given to 2 clairvoyants to try and find more information. This also failed to turn up any new information at all. The bodies were eventually laid to rest, but to this day they remain headless as the heads were lost during World War II.
I find that bizarre too. Like, they separated the bodies from the heads to help with the case.
I mean,
what?
They're kicking around, clairvoyance. Or less than a year after the murders, in February of 1923, the farm was demolished by the new owner, Joseph Gabriel, and a mattock was found hidden under the floorboards above the kitchen, and a penknife was found in the barn. The mattock was said to be a specialist tool made by Andreas himself, with a protruding screw and a nut on an iron plate attached to the blade. It is thought that he made this tool to stun and kill his pigs. Now, this would also have potentially made him proficient at murdering his family, and there is one theory that he killed his family before tripping and falling onto the mattock himself and accidentally killing himself, bleeding out slowly, or maybe even, given that the guy was not a popular man, someone else discovered him injured and finished him off.
I must say that whilst it is a theory, I think it's the most out there. It's a bit
Yeah, I was going to
ridiculous.
say,
He tripped and killed himself.
kind of sideshow Bob with a rake from The Simpsons. No,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see that one happening.
Yeah. No, but it is a theory, so we have to include it.
Yeah.
In the middle of May 1927, a stranger was said to have stopped a resident at Weldhofen at midnight, asking him questions about the murder before shouting that he was the murderer and then running into the woods. But the stranger was never identified. With no clear motive to be gleaned from the crime scene, the police began to formulate a list of suspects, and despite repeated arrests, no murderer has ever been found, and the files were closed in 1955. The last interrogations took place in 1986 before Detective Chief Superintendent Konrad Muller retired. Hundreds of people have been questioned in this case, but here's a couple that stand out.
The first is Carl Gabriel, the husband of the widowed Victoria Gabriel. He had reportedly been killed in December of 1914 in the first year of the First World War by a shell attack in Arras in France. His body had never been recovered. After the murders, people began to speculate whether he had in fact died in the war. Some believe he was in Groban in 1918 and joined the Russian army after killing the family. There are several POWs being held in Russia that claim an officer who later released them claimed to be the murderer from Hinterkaifeck. Victoria had conceived and given birth to her son Joseph in her husband's absence. The boy was rumoured to have been the product of an incestuous relationship between Victoria and her father Andreas, for which in 1914 Andreas Gruber was sentenced to 1 year in prison for incest, and Victoria was sentenced to 1 month in prison. Now, there's one case of someone who was a child at the time of the murders. They were present when locals rushed to see the scene after the murder reports and claimed that there was a guy reading papers in Victoria's bedroom who got quite irate. They later claimed that it may have been Carl Gabriel. If this is the case, he had hung about after the murders right up to the point that the police arrived. That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
It's fake death or misreported death, and the fact that he hung around right until, I'm not sure, you would hang around for that long.
But there are multiple people that claim they're in Russia with a guy that was German, working as an officer in Russia, who claimed he was at Hinterkaifeck, and the reason that he released them is because he didn't like the fact other people were getting the blame for the murders. So he releases them and goes, look, just make sure they know the truth.
I mean, yeah, you do get serial killers and people have done that do, they want the fame, they want to boast, they don't like other people getting credit for their doings.
Yeah. Well, our next suspect, who we've mentioned a few times already, although you might be listening to this in the morning, so I shouldn't have said tonight. Could be lunchtime, could be
tonight for
any
us.
Time of the day. It's
nearly
tonight for us. It's nearly the witching hour. So one of the other suspects was, as mentioned previously, Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Shortly after the death of his first wife in 1918, Lawrence had a sexual relationship with Victoria Gabriel and possibly Father Joseph. It's thought that Gruber had prevented him from marrying Victoria. I do have some thoughts on this.
Oh.
When Gruber was charged with incest and imprisoned, Lawrence was the town official and he appears several times in the court documents. So was this why Andreas refused to let Victoria marry him?
That bad blood there,
So they already had a rivalry going on here, which again doesn't help Lawrence's case when you look at the murders themselves. Lawrence came under suspicion by locals early in the investigation because of his several suspicious actions immediately after the discovery of the bodies. When Lawrence and his friends arrived to investigate, they had to break a gate to enter the barn because all the doors were locked. However, immediately after finding the 4 bodies in the barn, Lawrence apparently unlocked the front door with a key.
Key that had gone missing, according to Andreas.
He'd reported to someone in the town, hadn't he, that he'd lost
Yeah.
a key in the days before. When asked by his companion why he'd gone into the house alone when it was unclear if the murderer might still be there, Lawrence allegedly stated that he went to look for his son Joseph. It is known that Lawrence had disturbed the bodies at the scene, thus potentially compromising the investigation. During questioning, he also told police that, and I quote, "To be quite frank, these people weren't good," adding that God had a hand in rectifying that. Apparently, the Grubers had had other children as well as Victoria and had not cared for or fed them well. They'd locked them in the cellar for days at a time. Their whereabouts is actually unknown, but at least one is definitely confirmed as having to have died. On his deathbed in 1941, Lawrence did still claim that he was not the killer. I have one other note there, is that I've read multiple times that he was cleared in the courts before his death of murder,
Yeah.
but I can't find any evidence of that.
But you got the fact that he was described at the crime scene as being quite still and unmoved, you know?
Yeah, initially when the other 2 were throwing up outside, he just carried on and went straight to
Yeah.
the body. Yeah.
So next we have Paul Muller. Now, author Bill James, in his book The Man from the Train, alleges that a man known as Paul Muller, who is a German migrant, may have been responsible for the murders. Muller was the only suspect in the murder of the Newton family in Massachusetts in 1898. They were killed in their isolated farm using a pickaxe. The bodies of the victims were again moved and stacked up, much like Hinterkaifeck. Paul Muller was a itinerant farmhand working for the Newton at the time of their murders. There is actually other murders connected to Paul. You've got a murder in Colorado Springs in September of 1911. In October of 1911, he's linked to murders in Illinois and Kansas. And then in 1912, there is another one in Kansas, another one in Iowa. Finally, there's one in 1914, again in Illinois. So this guy's a strong contender.
These follow the train line as well. That's the point of the man on the train. All of those places are along the train line.
There you go.
And the theory is he hopped on trains, murdered another family, and then went on again.
So yeah, it's who do we think did it?
Lawrence.
Yeah, but he has been
I've spent
times.
I've spent a lot of time with this. The fact that the dad did it, ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not buying that.
Paul Miller, string of murders in America that I think are confirmed, but the fact that he would have had to have gone back to Germany, which is to escape conviction potentially, to do another murder, then go back to the States again, I think it's a stretch. There are other suspects. These are the main ones, I think.
Yeah.
How the guy that died in a trench in World War One. Again, it's a little bit pushing it for me. Lawrence, as I've already mentioned, I feel like Lawrence had a rivalry with Hans Gruber.
Yeah, with Hans Gruber over his fair daughter.
Yeah, and then there's the fact that maybe he knew that Joseph wasn't his and he was an incestuous son. I mean, he goes on to talk to the police and say that they weren't a good family and stuff. Like, he clearly didn't rate them highly. Would he have gone as far as to murder them? I don't know. There is, I don't know if it was a university or something, or it was something connected with the police that did an investigation more recently, and they did come to a conclusion as to who did the murders.
Oh.
But they never released the information. Now, my thought is that there are still family around living in the area, and so
Yeah,
they
so
didn't want
no
to.
one alive from that is around anymore, you know. I was like,
But
oh,
they have ancestors. So
yeah,
Lawrence Schlittenbauer, if he did it, still has ancestors that live in that area, and they didn't want any issues, so they haven't released that information. But yeah, that's I mean, what do you think?
I I think it's just about Lawrence for me. Actually, it's either Lawrence or um, Paul. I think he does have a bit of a MO by the sounds of it. But I think I think Lawrence would be my choice if I had to pick one of them who did it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the versions that you hear lean a lot into the paranormal, so they always go down the original maid left because
yeah.
there were these noises in the loft. She thought the house was haunted,
In the
and I think
Witchwood.
yeah, and a lot of stories lean on that. And actually, when you really break it down, I think it is just a true crime story. I
Yeah.
don't think there's something spooky. The noises in the loft could be separated if you then said, well, Lawrence was having an affair with Victoria, but so was the dad. So if people are hearing noises in the loft,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Which have been someone.
necessarily point to
Yeah.
the same person that did the murders either.
No.
It could also be that some random person was passing through and killed the whole family, and they don't come into the story because no one knows they did it.
That would yeah. That would make more sense as well.
But no, I think, yeah, probably Lawrence. But it's like I said, they have decided who's done it and not announced it. So I think the police know, but
Yeah.
we're never going to actually find out the truth. So we can speculate till the cows come home who weren't murdered.
Yeah, a lot of the sources I was looking at and sort of secondary sources and listening to podcasts and things like that on this, yeah, a lot of people do lean into the supernatural element of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is one of those cases where, yeah, scariest things out there are people.
That's why I record at a distance from you.
It's probably good.
You loved that story, didn't you? You
Oh
looked
yeah,
so
it's
disturbed.
scary. Pleasant dreams.
I've spent months with this.
No, I'm impressed. I'm impressed. You've done well.
I've spent months with it. I think it's a good overall. And he's pouring more wine for those that are
I need
listening and
it.
can't see. On that note, have you got any weird news?
I do. I do. So I've actually gone for
Because for those listening at 8 a.m., it's actually 1 a.m. for us.
yeah, I think I've fused my chair. So I've gone to the reputable US Sun for this.
US, son.
The US Sun.
That's got to be worse than the sun, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Just yeah.
Go on then.
Now this one is another UFO one. UFO hunters scouring frozen lake with sub-drone in fresh search for mystery spaceship that fell from the sky 77 years ago.
Ooh, I'm in. Go for it.
The first sonar images from the lake show an object lying underwater. UFOologists, although Sean's it's a ufologists,
I believe it's ufologist.
Ufologists. I really the amount of UFO ones I'm doing recently. I need a I want to believe poster behind me now. You know.
I've got one just there.
I know you do. I need one.
I'll get you one.
Thank you. Ufologists have begun a searching operation in the frozen lake for the remains of a UFO that is thought to have crashed in the water 77 years ago. The suspected spaceship was allegedly seen by locals living in the village of Røros in Norway back in 1947 and has remained a point of intrigue ever since. To me, the sonar scan looks like a ship on its side. Now researchers have begun a fresh search to hunt it down after the sonar revealed a 46-foot long object under the surface of Lake Djupsjøen. Djupsjøen? My God, I can't pronounce that.
Sound like you're talking backwards.
That Red Dwarf episode. Lake Djupsjøen. A lake. It's very late. Okay, it's spelled DJUPSJOEN.
Exactly.
Bat Lake. Legend says that in 1947, the mayor of the village of Roros witnessed a strange object fall near his home, which ended up crashing into the lake, and the story's been passed down in the region ever since. Photographer and UFO hunter Rue Rostad said the UFO looked like a rocket and it made lots of noise. It turned 180 degrees and landed in the lake behind us. This could just be a rocket test. Multiple investigations have been carried out over the years, but all efforts have failed to try and find any type of craft in the waters. Rue has now gathered a team and resources to kickstart the search operation. He said, "We found an object that is located just below this hole. They bored a hole in the ice. It measures 14 metres long and 3 metres wide." A documentary on the incident is underway, local media has reported. Norwegian ufologist and member of the Norwegian UFO Centre, Arnold Loken, said, "It's really exciting. It's one of the largest UFO search operations in Norwegian history." Meanwhile, documentary makers have released pictures of bizarre three-fingered alien mummies while probing whether the infamous figures are fake or alien. It goes on just to talk about other alien stories. But yeah, a good old-fashioned UFO hunt, but with potentially something they're actually looking for is down there.
It's interesting because you're on a bit of a UFO thing
I
at the
am.
minute.
It's, yeah. In the last few have been UFOs. But yeah.
To be fair, it is the only thing we've agreed that we're not sure about.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I'm enjoying the UFO ones. As you say, it's one that we agree on, more or less. And yeah, there's a bit of UFO fever going on recently. You know, there's a lot of people reporting this stuff.
I mean, if we want to just tie in the fact that we record multiple episodes at a time, we can say that I haven't heard anyone else try to open the door to my studio.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So 2 weeks later.
There's a tie back to the previous episode that would have happened 2 weeks ago for you, but was the same night for me. I've been watching that door, waiting for someone to try it again, but it's not happened.
I've actually been bribing Ocean with sweets so that she stays up and just goes and tries to creep you out during recordings. All right, what weird news have you got for me?
Massive footprints along Torquay coast baffle locals.
Oh.
A group were walking with rock-solid co-steering when they stumbled upon the mysterious footprint which they believe could belong to Bigfoot. The large footprint, I mean, he's probably on holiday. It was found near Maidencourt on the Torquay coast path this weekend.
Ooh.
Some have questioned who or what it belonged to. They said that although the path was muddy, these large footprints emerged from the nearby woods at Watcombe. The footprints came from the woods, followed the coast path for roughly 20 metres and then veered off back to the woodland. The group who discovered the prints say that they were weirded out, with one member of the group saying, "The prints were big. I'm a size 11, and they were half as big again. Clearly a barefoot. Every print was perfect, like the one in the photo." There is a photo. You can Google it. You'll find it. In 2006, sightings of a large woodland animal in the UK lasted for around 6 weeks, with 15 witnesses eventually coming forward to claim that they saw Bigfoot. They described an ape-like creature around 5 feet tall with brown hair covering its body. And I find this very interesting. With a green face, but no tail.
But no tail. And a green face. Some kind of woodland spirit crept
5 foot tall, brown-haired creature with a green face.
5 foot tall, so massive feet for its size.
And 5 foot is giant, right?
But I'm saying, apparently it's got huge feet. But, you know.
Yeah. On 2 occasions, the being was seen swinging from tree branches with tremendous agility. In 2002, when reports of a Littlefoot in Devon came out, the director of North Devon's Centre for Fortean Zoology, John Downs, said, "I have many similar reports of such creatures being seen in Devonshire woodland." And this one is a real cracker because it has so much separate and credible corroboration to it. While sightings of a large hairy creature regularly hit the headlines in North America, experts have questioned whether a similar animal could be wandering the British Isles. There have been researchers who claim the existence of Bigfoot-like creatures in the UK, with folklore routinely claiming a large beast was wandering the woods. The footprints came from the woods and followed the coast path for roughly 20 meters. I said that already, but it says it again. The group who discovered the prints say they were all weirded out, with one member of the group saying the prints were big. Again, says it again. Article's repeating itself. That's basically the same again. And me.
Isn't Littlefoot? Isn't that the little dinosaur before time?
The only thing I was going to... Yeah. So, I'm a bit intrigued. I think...
Yeah.
That the director of North Devon's Centre for Fortean Zoology. No, I'm intrigued by North Devon Centre for Fortean Zoology.
Oh.
I reckon. No offense if he's listening.
He might well.
It shouldn't be too hard to get him on the podcast.
I think we should do it.
So I think I should reach out.
Don't do it now. You've had too much wine.
It's the best time.
Yes, let's just call everyone. Look, Gillian, I'll get Gillian Anderson. You go for him.
Let's find his phone number. Let's find her phone number. Let's get Mulder, right?
Call him live on the podcast.
And I think, I do think, in all seriousness, I don't know what North Devon Centre for Fortean Zoology is. I'll have to do some research, but I think it might be worth getting them, at least reaching out. Maybe we can get them on the show. That's what I'm saying.
Sounds interesting. I've been wanting to do a cryptid one for a while. I mean, I do properly love a bit of cryptozoology. You know what it was for me? In the 80s, early 90s, you had that Arthur C. Clarke series, and that covered cryptozoology loads. And I found this massive romanticism in the idea of looking around jungles for dinosaurs that were still around and stuff like that. I mean, I think that was my first far out there idea of what I wanted to do when I grew up, was I want to go and hunt dinosaurs that are still around in the jungle.
So if you've got any stories that you'd like us to read out on the show, or if you want to come on the show, you can send us an email at wyrdwessex@pm.me, or you can contact us on our Facebook and Instagram. As usual, we have a TikTok. Don't communicate through that because we might get banned at any point. They don't like our logo. Apparently he's too erect.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's discrimination. It's chalk hill figures.
We're being discriminated for our culture, which is
exactly our Bronze Age culture, or our Saxon culture in that sense.
Saxon, I think you'll
find.
But
you say you're being discriminated against our Saxon culture, and it makes us sound like supremacists, doesn't it?
Yeah, but we're Saxon and we know
it.
And yeah, so if you want a t-shirt like Andy is modeling for us today,
ta-da!
Currently he has the only one in existence.
That's it.
I paid for the fucker and I don't even have one. I do have a tattoo to prove
got
it.
A little bit of money back through me buying one. I got
if you're
got some stickers as well. Plan to, stick those in inconvenient places.
Yeah, you can get merch on the Redbubble store. But obviously subscribe, share, comment on the video if you like it, comment if you're leaving. But yeah, it's another one in the bag.
Yeah, and until next time, thanks for listening and stay weird.
Guys, getting late. I'm going to leave it there. And me.